I would say because not enough incentives have been created for going forward and not enough disincentives have been created for maintaining the status quo, especially when we found the magic formula. And it was a magic formula that kind of worked for both sides until last week, in a way, according to Khalil. The magic formula is the peace process. You express your filiality to the peace process, you say the magic words, 2 states, everything on the ground is going in totally the opposite direction. But as long as we maintain the peace process, as long as we say 2 states, somehow it's all going to be all right eventually. For the PA, this has meant, until now at least, an exclusively negotiation-centric approach to delivering Palestinian independence and statehood. For the donor community, it has meant that 15 years into funding the PA, we still pretend that this is a state-building exercise, while no state is on the horizon. And not because necessarily of what the PA is doing or not doing, certainly not in the current leadership under Salam Fayyad, but because of the reality on the ground. So what in fact is being funded is an occupation maintenance exercise. But as long as you call it by its magic name of peace process, it's okay. The reality on the ground is that in 1993, there were 111,000 Israelis living in the West Bank. That number today, according to the IDF official statistics, is over 300,000. And by the way, the settler numbers are just the tip of the iceberg. It's the entrenchment of a reality on the ground, so-called fabric of life, roads, etc. The belief of the people on both sides. It's not that in a poll you won't get the majority still saying yes to a 2-state formula that looks like Geneva and the Clinton parameters. But the belief of the people is that this isn't going to happen. Certainly not anytime soon. And the reality is also that at least what we saw in Gaza in the new year is that each round of clashes could become more and more ugly and more devastating and more deadly. And we've actually seen the deindustrialization of Gaza, with devastating consequences for a place so full of such a young population. Were it not for the work of UNRWA and others, you wouldn't even have the basic maintenance of social structures in Gaza that you have today. And yet the basic premise hasn't changed. Now, I'm fascinated to see the trajectory of developments on the Palestinian side, and that's certainly one of the wild cards there today. I don't think it dates from the entry into government of Benjamin Netanyahu. I actually think we were stuck and we weren't going anywhere long before that, and if Mahmoud Abbas has changed what he said to Lally Weymouth a few months ago, and now he's saying actually it was very serious with Abbas, whereas previously he said it wasn't. It was very serious with Olmert, whereas previously he said it wasn't so serious. I actually think it was a peace process that wasn't delivering. I don't think, and I'm going to be blunt, I don't think we've seen a strategic plan coming out of the Fatah-led PLO either. If indeed these questions of what would a turn to a one-state option or a turn to unilateralism look like, and we're still so at the beginning of thinking that through from a Palestinian perspective, then that says something about how locked into a formula that wasn't working the Palestinian leadership became over the years. I think the tension was visible many years ago. The tension between being a PLO dedicated to liberation from occupation and being a Palestinian Authority dedicated to cooperating with your occupier on a day-to-day. And how do you square that struggle? And I don't think you could over such a long period of time. So where does that leave us today? Benjamin Netanyahu's offer of settlement restraint, and I hesitate to say this given that Dan Kurtzer will be speaking after me, and he certainly knows this better probably than any of us, but I would argue that it is unprecedented. It meets the technical definition of unprecedented. It has not happened before. No, really it is. There hasn't been an Israeli government that defined which units it was going to continue building, not beyond those units. However, If one were to continue building 3,000 housing units, that's more or less an annual average of building in the territories. Of course, East Jerusalem is excluded. So, unprecedented. It's true that there has not been a precondition before, and by the way, this administration also did not make it a precondition. That's a misreading of what the administration said. There has not been a precondition in the last 15 years, 16 years of negotiations, that first of all, settlements are frozen before negotiations can take place. But even if both of those are true after 16 years, they're not enough. It doesn't matter. The reality on the ground in 2009 isn't what it was in 1994. There's a clause in Oslo, in the first agreement, that says neither side shall prejudice final status talks by their actions on the ground. I think by now the settlement extension probably qualifies as in some way prejudicial. So, where does this leave an American administration that I think does deserve credit? And Toni mentioned it. First of all, and for me, this is the key, this is an administration that has defined solving this issue, resolving this conflict as an American national security interest. This isn't a favor to Israeli friends or Palestinian friends. And when General Jones spoke last week at the J Street conference, he said if there's one thing that could have a positive knock-on effect to everything else we're trying to do, if I could do one thing, it would be resolve this. An administration that has made this a priority, an administration that is engaged early. I would argue that all those are positive things, and I even think you can have a few months. When you engage on this from day one, not in year 7 or year 8, but from day one, you can reach an impasse in month 10 and there's still time for a course correction. So all these voices of woe are we and gloom and doom, I think are just a little bit premature. But it is time for a course correction. There have been strategic reviews in a number of foreign policy arenas, and I think this needs one as well. The administration inherited a peace process that was fundamentally broken. Just by doing it better, you're not going to fix it. Confidence-building measures, leaving the sides to bilateral negotiations, gradualism, all these things have been tried for 16 years. I think the jury is in. The sell-by date on Oslo expired in 1999. That's 10 years ago. So I'd close by saying this. I don't think we have much time to waste, especially in the destabilization scenario that Khalil presented. But I do think there's a need for a rethink. I don't think the Palestinians are going to negotiate their deoccupation with an Israeli side which is at best ambivalent about whether it's actually up for the task of deoccupation. I think it's going to take the creation of a disincentive and incentive structure from the outside, leadership from the outside, including addressing some of Israel's legitimate concerns, including Israel's legitimate security concerns, by third-party answers, not answers that a Palestinian people under occupation can provide while still in that predicament. I haven't had a chance to address Syria and Lebanon, or the extent to which I think this is very relevant in a new Iran strategy, but I hope we will touch on those, and certainly the next speakers will. But I would end by saying it's way too early to give up on this administration. But if we keep going as we are, then I'll think again about that.
Daniel, thank you. Daniel, thank you very much.